Hello everyone, today I'm painting this black and white panda using a brown and a blue. Here's the brown, we'll get to the exact colours in a moment. I've got a number 8 round brush here and I'm applying it to the cheek area. Now this is not meant to be brown in the final result, it's obviously meant to represent the white of the panda's cheek fur in shade. And here's the blue, I'm using it as the preliminary colour on the ears. I'll just soften that edge there for the cheeks. So when that dries, that'll be much lighter. And an even pale value here, dragging some of that brown across into the underneath of his chin. Here's the colours we're using. This is Indigo, Winsor. This is Burnt Umber by Michael Harding. When you mix them together, you get this grey colour, and if you get the proportions right, a little bit of extra blue, then you get an even darker, tending towards a black colour. So you can get a range of greys and blacks depending on the amounts of blue and brown that you put in. Okay, so here's the black mix, and I'm dotting it or dropping it into the blue with the ears. Now you'll have seen me do this in previous paintings. I will very often paint wet into wet, and I'll start with one colour and then drop another colour on top of it. And the reason for that is when it dries, you get a nice little range of different colours rather than just solid black. So I'm going to repeat that process now for all the limbs. So we start off with the blue undercolour, and it doesn't have to be even, as you can see there. I'll just soften that edge with a damp brush so that the merge into the white area is soft. And now the mixed dark colour, brown and blue, mixed together to make this dark. Let's colour black. And I drop that in to the whole of the area, and then I repeat that on all 4 limbs. Now the gap underneath where the belly is, I'm dragging across my wet brush across that area to make a kind of cool white colour. And then I'm repeating that cool white on other areas of the panda. So these are very light values now. I've got a much more detailed video on values, which I posted last week. If you haven't seen that one, I'll put a link to it in the description box. And also at the end of this video. But basically we use the values to sculpt the shape of the head and the shape of the panda. Sometimes I'll use a bit of tissue just to soften off the edges rather than the brush. I've got a little gap there where I didn't want to touch the dark to the light because I didn't want them to run together. I'll just fill that gap in and also strengthening the dark of the area of the body under the head. We talked about this in the last video. This is to maximise the contrast. If you've got your darkest dark against your lightest light, that's the area of maximum contrast on your painting, and you want a good contrast where the head and the body come together. You don't want them to blend together, you want a good separation between the two. Okay, so now I'm painting the dark eye patch of the panda, and I'm starting with the burnt umber. I've switched to a finer brush. This is a rigger brush. If you don't have a rigger brush, use whatever fine brush you have. The rigger brush is good because it holds a lot of water. You don't have to keep recharging it with paint. So once the umber is in there, it's wet, and dropping the dark colour, the black, wet into wet onto the umber area. Now when it dries, there'll be some variation. It won't be a flat black area. It will have some undertones of the brown. And I'm using the brown where I want the colours to be warmer, the blue where I want them to be cooler. So here I'm starting off the nose with a mix of brown and blue, and then an even deeper mix, a blacker mix, for the fine lines around the mouth. I'm using quite a wet mix, and I'm using the bigger brush. So you have to be careful here that you don't accidentally paint into your light areas. Except here I've got the bigger brush cleaned off and it's damp. And I'm dragging some of the nose paint up onto the muzzle to give myself a little bit more definition, sculpting out the shape of the panda. Dropping a tiny bit of blue, and then I'm just gonna lift that off. And the effect of that is to get a number of tones onto the painting. And then I use the damp brush to lift off some of the lip. Now I am sculpting again. I'm trying to make sure that the head pops out from the body. And in order to do that, I'm giving an extra value at the top of the head. That's the indigo. And then I'm using it around the eyes as well for the same reason, to create more definition, more of a shape. Now, let's get those eyes in. I'm starting off with the umber, the brown. And then I'm painting the dark area around the eyes. And I don't mind if those two bleed together a little bit. Now I need to fix this foot. I've got the wrong angle completely here, as you can see from the finished version. Well, that's okay. Wet your brush, drag it along your mistake, and you can remove it and give yourself a nice little shadow at the same time. Deepening the black on this nearish leg. And now I'm sculpting some more of the muzzle. So the light's coming from the top, so it's lightest on the top, and it's going to get darker as we make our way around the muzzle. Remember, we're trying to get this to pop out forward. And so we need to keep altering the values by looking at your reference photo, basically, and copying that. Okay, it's all dried, and I've not left any white for the eyes, just a bit of an error, so that's okay. This time I'm just going to use a pen, gel pen. You could also use gouache or acrylic or even the white watercolour. Just drawing a bag under each eye, though. We'll come back to that in a sec. Let's draw the claws in, and when it's all dry, I'm glazing over those bags under his eyes with some of the brown. And there's the finished painting. Blue and brown makes black. Hope you enjoyed that and you found it useful. Look at those lovely runs. These look like fur under his belly. Here's the original video from last week on values. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.